Hello. I'll wait for everybody to pop back in. Now, I have no idea what happened, buddy. So I'm sorry. Well, let me. People are slowly drifting in. 23 people. Oh man, I had like 6,800, 6,900 people. And now, where is Tiffany Dover? Okay, well, I'll just start rambling on like I was rambling before. I mean, I don't really give a shit if I've got, how many I got? They got 68 people or 6,800. Doesn't matter. It's still the same. Okay, and anybody who's interested, they'll catch up later. So anyway, the point. See, where was I? Oh man, it's just a lot of material and a lot of stuff, a lot of moving parts. Right. So the Russians never in a million fucking years did they think that the Americans would grab their money the way that they did, but they did. Okay. And the Russians, well, they're thinking to themselves, well, two things. Number one, we've got the other 340 million of our foreign currency reserves elsewhere. So we can support the ruble during this downtime, during this economic, up and down time, right? And people are showing back up. Yeah. Okay, good. And so we've got the cash reserves. I mean, the Americans stole 300 billion fucking dollars, man. That's fucking evil. Anyway, they stole that, but we got the other, 340 billion. And we can use that to support the ruble and support our economy and get the Russian economy through this bad patch. And what's key is that the Europeans still need Russian natural gas. And in fact, the sanctions package cut out Russian banks from the SWIFT system, except those banks involved in payment of the natural gas from Europe. Because there's no way for the Americans or anybody, quite frankly, to replace that Russian natural gas. Okay? It's a monopsony, a single seller. Okay? Wait, no, a monopoly? I forget the difference between monopsony and monopoly right now. I mean, I'm like thinking about this stuff, so to remember that from my memory is too hard right now, so fuck it. But the point is that they need the Russians. They need the Russians, and the Russians, how can I put it? The Europeans need the Russians more than the Russians need the Europeans, because the Russians have other potential customers for their natural gas. And the other thing too that's key, that because of this whole energy crisis situation, the price of gas has risen. Therefore, the Russians don't actually need to produce as much to have the same income. You see? In fact, they could shut off the European gas and continue with their existing customers in South Asia and East Asia. And in terms of money coming in, they're not going to lose a dime. See? See the beauty of the Russian situation? They did all these sanctions against the Russians, and it only improved Russia's overall strategic position. Sure, the Russians took a short-term hit insofar as their stock market and the ruble, but long-term, they're sitting pretty. They're sitting more than pretty, okay? And any fool could have told you this. But of course, the Europeans are dumber than a sack of bricks, quite frankly. I mean, they're fucking morons, man. I mean, they're just so goddamn stupid. And so they decided that, they're going to sanction Russia to high heaven. They're going to sanction it to a point of xenophobia and real ugly shit, But they're going to keep on buying Russian natural gas. And today came the announcement. Oh boy. The announcement came from Putin. And it was sort of like predictable, but still a surprise. He said that Gazprom would no longer accept any payment except in rubles. Now, this is really a big fucking deal. Now, a lot of you are wondering, how come Russia doesn't cut off its contracts with Europe, payback for sanctions, right? Well, because the Russians are very clever, like I said, and they realize that a lot of times credibility is much more important than any short-term gain. And so the Russians have, over the years, decades really at this point, they have never failed with a long-term contract. Never. They have never defaulted on a long-term gas contract. Okay? During this whole invasion, they are still pumping gas through Ukraine to Europe. They're still doing it, And the Ukrainians aren't blowing up those gas pipelines because they need the revenue, and the Russians aren't blowing up those gas pipelines because they need the revenue, and they do not want to break their contracts. I mean, they're that serious, but why? Because see, that kind of goodwill, that kind of dependability, you can't buy that except with consistency. Okay. And it's always a smart move to just fulfill your contracts, even with the people that you hate their guts, but fulfill your contracts, which is what Gazprom has been doing. Okay. And the Germans have during this, somebody made the estimate that they've paid something like 3-4 billion rubles, euros so far during this not quite a month of conflict. They're paying what they have to pay the Russians. And so anyway, the Russians today announced that they are no longer going to accept payment in any currency except rubles. Now this is really fucking interesting, and I'll explain why. Because you see, previously the Russians were content to receive euros or dollars for their payments, for their gas deliveries. Now, why would the Russians want euros or dollars? Well, very simple. You see, the Russians sell gas, and they go out there to the market, to the European market and the American market, and they buy goods and services from the Americans and from the Europeans. So for the Russians, it's good to have dollars. It's good to have euros. So they sell their gas for euros, and they take those euros and they buy stuff in Europe in euros, because the sellers in Europe are only going to take euros. Of course, that's their currency. Ditto with the American dollar, right? But see, since the Russian economy has been sanctioned to death, the most vicious sanctions ever imposed on any country ever, right? All of a sudden, the Russians, for all practical purposes, they can't buy anything in Europe and they can't buy anything in America. So why would they want dollars or euros? You see? They don't need dollars. They don't need euros. They're worthless to them because they can't buy stuff with those dollars and those euros because of the sanctions. See, the Americans created a wall between their economies and the Russian economies, right? But all of a sudden, the Russians have no need for dollars. What the fuck are they going to do with dollars? Nothing. Because they can't buy shit in America because of sanctions. Ditto with the euro. And it's very predictable if you think of it from the point of view of the Russians. And of course, the Europeans and the Americans, because they're so fucking arrogant and self-centered, never stop to consider the position from the point of view of the Russians. So for the Russians, they're thinking, well, euros, I can't buy anything with euros. Dollars, I can't buy anything with dollars. But with rubles, I can buy shit here at home. So I want rubles. So Putin said, give me rubles. And all of a sudden, the Europeans are going to have to figure out a way how to get rubles. And what's that going to do to the ruble? What do you think it's going to do? If all of a sudden, major players need to find rubles to pay for this essential commodity, gas, well, obviously, the value of the ruble is going to go up. Supply and demand, baby. You can't escape supply and demand. If there is the same supply of something, but all of a sudden a lot more demand for that something, in this case, rubles, the price of that something, rubles, is going to go up a lot higher. Okay? Now, of course, this isn't going to happen in one fell swoop, although it already started to happen today. But it's going to happen because, of course, these contracts, for technical reasons and just machinery reasons, it takes a while for these contracts to flip over from euros to dollars. But it's going to happen, okay? By the end of April for sure, okay? And so what's going to happen is that Europe and the UK, they're going to have to take their euros, take their pound sterling, take their zloty for Poland, and go out and buy rubles. What does that mean? The ruble is going to become the reserve currency, unbelievable as that may sound. And the Europeans and the Americans who insisted on these fucking sanctions, they're the ones to blame. It's unbelievable. But what they have done, it's so remarkable. It's something that I've never anticipated, because everybody always thought that the ruble is too unstable a currency, too weak a currency. But all of a sudden, when you have major buyers of gas, like the Europeans, who depend on that shit, and they're going to have to go out and buy rubles, all of a sudden the ruble is going to be rock fucking solid. It's going to be like the hard on of James Dean in those porno flicks. You know what I'm saying? The hardest fucking thing on the planet. Yeah. And it's a thing of beauty, because you see, this is where America gets its power, the petrodollar. Because you see, in 1974, when was it? I think it was July of 74. I do believe his name was William Simons. I always forget the name, because I had a professor called Walter Simons at Dartmouth. He was a great guy. We used to play squash together. He was a medieval European history professor. He was just a lovely man, and I haven't talked to him in years. But if he's listening, hey Walter, how's it going? And his name is Walter Simons, and this Treasury Secretary was called William Simons, I want to say. Anyway, this guy, the Treasury Secretary under Nixon, at the end of Nixon's regime, he went to Saudi Arabia and cut a deal with the Saudis, and one of the most important deals in American history, quite frankly, and possibly world history, because the Bretton Woods system had sort of like collapsed, okay, because of balance of payments issues. And so Nixon had taken the dollar off the gold standard, and the dollar was cratering with inflation. It was becoming soft as, Jesus Christ, soft like a 90-year-old's dick. You know what I'm saying? And Simons, this Treasury Secretary, went to the Saudis and he cut a deal, and it was the brilliant deal and so simple. He told the Saudis that he guaranteed the House of Saud protection, American military protection, not Saudi Arabia, the House of Saud, okay? He guaranteed them American military protection on the condition that the Saudis would, number one, sell all their oil in dollars exclusively, and number two, take those dollars, the excess dollars that they had, and park them in US Treasury bonds. And in exchange for that very simple deal, sell it in dollars and park your excess dollars in treasury bonds, the US would guarantee the House of Saud military security. And that is the basis of the petrodollar. And that is the basis of the American standard of living. Because what happens is that the rest of the world has to buy dollars in order to buy oil. You see? Because, say, a country like Japan, it wants to buy oil from Saudi Arabia or whomever. Now, the dollar is the currency of oil. You need dollars to buy oil. They don't sell it to you in any other currency. They don't sell it to you in yen. And so Japan has to go out into the currency markets and buy dollars. It buys dollars, and of course, what happens when Japan buys dollars is there's demand for the dollar, and so the value of the dollar maintains or even goes up with each yen that is spent by the Japanese to buy dollars, which they need to buy the oil to fuel their industry. Do you see? And that's the mechanism. That's the petrodollar. The rest of the world demands dollars, and that maintains the value of the dollar, the demand of the rest of the world. Remember, supply and demand. If there is a demand for something, the value of that thing goes up and up and up. When there's no demand, it goes down and down and down. And if you have a hard time thinking about this, figure the following. Like right now, you're living in a city or suburb or wherever, and you want a glass of water. And how much do you pay for it? Nothing. You just go to the tap and just turn on the tap and fill a glass of water and drink water, right? Because, there's plenty of supply and little demand. But suppose your plane crashes in the middle of the Sahara Desert, and, all of a sudden there's a liter of water and 10 people want to drink from it. The price of that water goes way up now, doesn't it? Yeah, of course, because everybody wants it and there's a limited supply, you see? Supply and demand. And so the rest of the world has been supporting the dollar. And because of this price support of the dollar, the US federal government, as well as the state governments and the municipalities and the agencies of the federal government release their own debt. That's called agency debt. See, each of these different players, they have issued debt confident that people would buy this debt because there's so much demand for the dollar. And this is how the US in general has been able to go into so much debt, because there's all this demand for the dollar because everybody needs dollars to buy oil. So basically, if you think about it, and this is a mental model that has proven to be very useful. Dick Cheney once famously said that deficits don't matter. And a lot of people were kind of like furious about it, but he was kind of right, because you see, if you think about it, see, the Saudi Arabia and the oil producing states that sell in dollars, for all intents and purposes, are the 51st state of the United States. Because think of it, their economies are integrated. They're creating a commodity and selling it in dollars as if it were like fucking California or Texas, right? They're selling it in dollars and they're parking it in treasury bonds, you see? And it's forcing everybody else to buy dollars, see? So that's what's going on. The US dollar is commodity backed, okay? And now, because of sanctions, all of a sudden, the ruble is commodity backed. And that's the thing, at the end of the day, commodities are all that matter. A lot of people say, well, the dollar is no longer backed by gold, which is dumb. It's a really dumb argument, right? Because what is gold? It's a commodity. What is oil? It is a commodity. What is natural gas? It's a commodity. What is wheat? It's a commodity. See, to have a strong currency, okay, it doesn't have to be pegged to the gold standard. Gold is actually a very small market. I forget the number. I do believe it's something like $50 billion in the world is actually gold, or more. I forget. It's not that much. I mean, you think it's a lot, but it's not. The other markets are much, much bigger. No, sorry. I think it's $10 trillion worth of gold. I forgot. Fuck it. It doesn't really matter. The numbers of this are not as important as you understanding the model of what I'm describing. That's the thing that you have to understand, okay? It doesn't matter the actual figures. They're just fucking huge. And they're so big that for all intents and purposes, they're meaningless, I mean, once you get to enough zeros, man, do you really know what the fuck it is? No, it's just beyond the imagination, right? So anyway, $1 trillion is $1 million. Can you imagine that? Having $1 million. I mean, $1 million on its own is just like an unimaginable number. 1 million of those, it's fiction for all intents and purposes, but it's a fiction that comes and bites you in the ass, like it's going to bite the Americans in the ass. In just a second, I'm going to explain. So the dollar was backed by gold, and then it went off the gold standard. But then it went on to the oil standard, because oil was backing the dollar, you see? And this system has worked like a charm, throughout the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s, and into the 2020s, right? But right now, it's collapsing, and very, very quickly. And that's why you're seeing all this inflation in the United States, right? Because energy prices are going through the roof. And what happened is that, see, the sanctions package, by creating this moat between the Russian economy and the Western economies, it removed the need that Russia had for dollars and euros, because they don't need them, because they don't have access to the goods and services that Europe and the United States have on offer. This is what the sanctions package did. And you see, Russia's economy, they always say, oh, it's the size of Italy. That's not accurate. Okay, in terms of purchasing power parity, which is a more accurate measure of an economy size, it's closer to Germany's. And if you start looking into different aspects of it, or let me phrase that, if you look at the McDonald's index, okay, which is a very surprisingly such a trivial item, the McDonald's index, the Big Mac index, is actually one of the most precise measurements of an economy. And it's basically very simple. You just go to different countries around the world and find out what price for a Big Mac, for just the burger, because the burger is the same everywhere, but it's going to have different prices. In Switzerland, it's really expensive, like 6 Swiss francs, it's just roughly $6, a little over $6. And in Russia, it's like $1.25 or something like that, or it used to be. if when McDonald's was around. But anyway, the point remains. See, the Big Mac index is actually the most precise index. In that measure, the ruble is profoundly undervalued, and the Russian economy is much, much bigger than the West pretends it is. So anyway, the point that matters is that, see, the Russian economy is big enough that the end of Russian demand for goods and services from the West is actually going to hurt the West as much as, if not more than, it'll hurt Russia, because Russia has other places to buy the stuff that Europe and North America was selling and is no longer selling because of sanctions. And people say that, oh, Chinese goods are crap. That's a lie. Your fucking iPhone comes from fucking China. That's where it was built. And you don't complain about its quality now, do you? No, certainly not. It's very good quality. And made in China. Look on the back. That's what it says. Okay? It says, yeah, designed in California, which is just so fucking pretentious if you ask me. But it's made in fucking China. And there's lots of other shit that's made in China. And the Russians are going to buy that shit. They're not going to fucking need Europe or America, because Europe and America decided to build this moat of sanctions. See? And so the European sellers are going to suffer. The American sellers are going to suffer. And all of a sudden, Russia says today, we are not selling gas anymore in euros or dollars because we don't fucking need euros or dollars, because you're not letting us buy shit in euros or dollars. So we want fucking rubles, and we want them fucking now. And in one stroke, Putin has created the petro ruble. And soon enough, it's going to be the agro ruble. Because you see, something that I had no idea, I never thought of it until I started looking at some graphs. There was this one great graph that I saw that had like squares of like the producers of grain, of wheat and barley and all the rest of it. By nation and by size of their export. Okay, it was just the export market. Did you know, and I had no idea about this, but did you know that between Russia, Belarus, Ukraine, and Kazakhstan, those four countries, well, they account for about 40% of the global wheat export market. 40%, 40. 2/5 of the global wheat market. Those four countries. I mean, I had no idea that Kazakhstan was such a big deal in fucking wheat. No idea at all. I mean, I've never really paid attention to agricultural commodities, but there you go. And see, Kazakhstan, because of the almost color revolution of a couple of months ago, and now the very strong relationship Kazakhstan has with Russia, because the leader of Kazakhstan recognizes that were it not for Vladimir Putin and the Russians, he'd be dead, let alone no longer a president of Kazakhstan, right? So he owes him. And Belarus, Lukashenko, he owes Putin. And Ukraine, well, the Russians are sewing up Ukraine. And don't let anybody say otherwise. And by the way, I've seen accounts of people saying that people here in the Russian soldiers here, they're failing, their all supplies are shot to hell, and they're suffering from frostbite, and that's why they're losing. And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? I'm here, okay, in Kharkov, and the weather has been lovely this past week, okay? And the temperature has been, between like -1 on the low side and about 5 degrees Celsius, right? I mean, hell, I went to the supermarket yesterday and walking back, I was sweating, man. I mean, I didn't even have like a thick parka, I had like a thin thing, right? I was kind of sweaty, I mean, Jesus, So it's not, frostbite. What the fuck are you talking about? I wasn't wearing gloves as I was carrying my bags, and I had to walk like a couple of kilometers, I guess, It must have been like 20 minutes, okay? I mean, you'd figure that if it was like that fucking cold, my fingers would have started getting like really hurting or something. Perfectly fine. What the fuck are they talking about over there anyway? Fucking morons on Twitter. Anyway, the point, and the serious point. These four countries are, for all intents and purposes, controlled by the Kremlin. The Kremlin controls the agricultural output of Russia, Kazakhstan, Ukraine, and Belarus as a practical matter. Because, we're currently with this invasion here in Ukraine, but eventually the Russians are winning. They're going to win the whole fucking thing. They're going to expunge Zelensky, install their own guy, and that'll be that. Okay, the Russians are going to own this fucking country, whether the West likes it or not. Okay, and as a practical matter, the window of opportunity for NATO has closed. There's no way for them to show up, and it's not going to happen. I don't think so, at any rate. At least now. Who knows? I mean, they're so fucking dumb they might do it. But anyway, the point. The Russians control 40% of the world's wheat export market. And in terms of barley and rye and all the other agro products, and let's not talk about, industrial like aluminum. Did you know, and I had no fucking idea, that Ukraine produces over 70% of the globe's needs for neon? I had no fucking idea, I mean, I read that and I'm like, I'm trying to pin down where that came from because it passed by my feed like a meme. So I'm not sure if it's actually real, but let's assume that it is. Okay. If it's real, it's like, fuck. And apparently neon is very necessary for chip production and all kinds of other shit. Right. So you see the kinds of commodities that the Russians have control over, because you don't have to own something to control it. The Russians don't own Belarus, they don't own Kazakhstan, but they do control it. And they can tell Lukashenko, and they can tell the fellow in Kazakhstan, whose name I can never pronounce, they can tell him, hey, be a pal and don't sell it to these guys, or do sell it to these other guys, see? So what does this mean? The ruble, it's the petro ruble and the agro ruble. They are going to be, the ruble rather, is going to be the reserve currency of the world. And I cannot believe that is going to happen, but it is, because it's backed by these commodities that everybody needs. And I thought to myself that it was always going to be maybe the renminbi, the RMB, the yuan or Chinese currency. I don't know why they have different names for the fucking thing, but they do. But I always thought that maybe, it was the Chinese who were going to step up and have the reserve currency. But now that I'm seeing it, it makes complete sense. A currency backed by something physical, commodities. The whole notion of having a currency backed by gold, why? Because it's real. It's a real thing. It's a tangible thing. Well, but the dollar has been backed by a tangible thing for all these years, oil. And now the Russians, with their ruble, are stepping up and taking over. That's basically what's happening. And I have no bones about it. I'm desperate to figure out a way to get into the ruble in a big fucking way. Because I think that a lot of investors are thinking like I'm thinking and realizing, holy fucking shit, the ruble of all the fucking currencies, man. I mean, it's like, if somebody said like the South African rand, it would have been less random. You know what I mean? But here we are, it's the fucking ruble that's going to replace the dollar as a reserve currency, because everybody in the world needs natural gas. Everybody in the world needs oil. Everybody in the world needs fucking wheat. You need food. Macron in France is warning people that they're going to have to ration food in France. Holy fucking shit. Yeah, and the reason he's saying that is because a lot of France's food comes from Ukraine and Russia. And see, the Ukraine planting season is coming up. And if this continues and there's no access to fertilizer and other implements necessary, gasoline, necessary for food planting, there isn't going to be a fucking harvest come the fall. And so people are going to go fucking hungry. They're not going to go fucking hungry in Ukraine or Russia. Okay, because even with the meager food that they plant, it'll be enough for the home crowd. It's the export market, Europe, that's going to get fucked. So, the Europeans, they fucked themselves with the gas, and now they're fucking themselves with the food. And the thing is, see, if they actually go ahead and do invade and start a war with Russia over Ukraine, that will definitely disrupt the planting season, and Europe will definitely not have any fucking food 6 months from now, and that's going to last all of next winter. And the Russians, of course, if the Europeans, NATO, decides to go to war with Russia, the Russians, contracts or not, they're going to cut off the natural gas just like that, And Europe is not going to have the energy for electricity. The euro is fucking toast. Okay? I mean, they really are. And it's like a fucking train that's going off the track. No, fuck that. It's going off a fucking cliff, man. This is all kinds of dangerous. And the Europeans, they don't seem to realize what the fuck they're doing. Or worse, they kind of like realize it. I mean, like Macron warning about the food shortages by the end of the year, but they're not playing it smart to avoid this fate. You know? Because they're so fucking beholden to the Americans, who are fucking idiots. Well, no, they're suicidal, as the name of this this live stream implies. That they're following the Americans off a cliff. Now let's talk about the Americans. See, the sanctions package, see, the inflation was already built in the cake before fucking Putin and the sanctions package, right? But it hasn't helped. The fact that the Russian oil got cut off from the States, yeah, it's only 3%, but in a tight oil market, like the American oil market, 3% can hurt you. Okay, it has a disproportionate effect on prices. It's not that you cut off 3% of your oil imports and your gasoline prices at the pump go up 3%. Oh, no, they go up a lot more. And I said in previous videos, a video that I posted a couple of weeks ago, I think, that, in 30 to 60 days, you'd see $10 a gallon, right? Well, today I saw a picture a guy took in California, $9 a gallon. Yeah. Oh, fuck, man. $9 a fucking gallon in California, where you need a car to take a crap, for crying out loud. I mean, holy fucking shit, man. $9. I mean, like, okay, you say this shit and you make the calculations and you do the back of the envelope thing and you're like, yeah, they'll hit $10 in 30 to 60 days, But it's sort of like a mathematical thing. When it actually happens, you're kind of shocked, even though you predicted it, like on your Excel spreadsheet or whatever the fuck. When it actually happens, you're like, damn, it's happening. And I guess to me, the surprise is not only that it's happening, but it's happening so goddamn fast. Because I did that live stream with that short or whatever it was that I did 2 weeks ago. Couldn't have been more than that. And here we are, $9 a fucking gallon, motherfucker. And the sky's the limit on this bad boy. Yeah. And here we have problems. See, the fact that the Americans stole those 300 billion that I mentioned before, right? Now, this should really scare the fuck out of you, and it scared a lot of fucking people. It scared the Saudis. Now, you gotta understand, Mohammed bin Salman, who's the de facto ruler of Saudi Arabia, I've said before, he's a smart guy. He's an incredibly smart guy, an incredibly energetic guy. And the only problem that I see with him is that many times he gets over his skis. He gets a little bit ahead of himself. He pulls off stunts that he's not quite ready to actually do, and that he should be just a little bit more patient, And I chalk that up to his youth. The guy is like in his late 30s, mid 30s, late 30s, something like that. I want to say 36 years old, something like that, And he's as tough as they come, ruthless as they come, smart as they come, right? I mean, he's no fucking dummy, but, he's got a little bit of that youthful impatience. But, and I'm saying this to lead up to what he's doing. He's exploring the possibility of selling Saudi oil in yuan, in Chinese yuan. Now that must scare the Americans very badly. That would mean, another big chunk off the petrodollar, because it's bad enough that the Russians are now going to start charging people, obliging people rather, to pay for the natural gas in rubles, and they're going to extend this to gasoline, not gasoline, to oil as well. I mean, it's inevitable. If you're going to do it to natural gas with the European contracts of Gazprom, inevitably in a month or two, Putin is going to say, "Oh, we're going to do the fucking same thing with oil, and the same thing with agro." I mean, like I said, the ruble is going to be the world's reserve currency, because Russia, with Kazakhstan, Belarus, and Ukraine in its back pocket, has a dominant position in all of the essential global commodities. And everybody's going to want to buy rubles. And it's shocking, like I said. I mean, I'm still in shock, because I just realized this today. Mhm. I had not really considered it, and it's just thinking about it and like writing it out. I'm like, fuck yeah, they're the reserve currency, and the dollar is going to lose its reserve currency status. And this is catastrophic for America because, see, if the rest of the world no longer demands dollars as much as it did before, then interest rates are going to rise. See, well, it's a little more complicated than that. Let me explain. What happens is that, see, when people don't demand dollars as much as they did before, dollar instruments, dollar assets, i.e., treasury bonds, they go down in price. As they go down in price, the yield goes up. Okay? Yield, remember, yields and prices are inversely correlated. Okay? And as the price goes down and the yields go up, it costs the American government more and more money to issue debt because they have to charge a higher interest. I mean, they have to pay rather a higher interest for the money that they're borrowing to cover the national deficit, you see? And so as this happens, as the price of money rises, there comes a moment when it's called the Minsky moment, when you cannot acquire enough debt to pay off the previous debt and continue operating, okay? And that Minsky moment has pretty much arrived, okay? And so the only solution for the Americans is going to be to print money. And if you thought that the printing money of QE was, enormous, I mean, you ain't seen nothing yet. I mean, hold my beer. Mhm. Now, the Americans have been very clever about how they've gone about printing money because what they've done is that they have told the Federal Reserve, or it was Ben Bernanke's idea back in, '08. What they do is that they just create money out of thin air. And they take this money that's been created out of whole cloth and they go out into the market and they buy assets, debt, bonds, right? They go out and buy these bonds. And by buying these bonds, they give it price support, okay? Now, back in 2008, they went out and bought MBS bonds, that was the original QE. But, now they've moved into treasury bonds and also municipal bonds and agency bonds. And so they're buying these bonds to give them price support. Mhm. Now, they have all these bonds on their balance sheet because they've created all this money out of thin air. And then in 2020 and 2021, they created even more money to finance all this, the COVID pandemic lockdown bullshit, it was just a fucking flu at the end of the day, deadly for elderly people, but, no big deal for most everybody else, but spilt milk. The thing is, see, the Federal Reserve is kind of like running out of options insofar as that's concerned. And they really have to taper it off and they really have to start raising interest rates because inflation is becoming a real fucking problem. Mhm. And we all see it. Okay, food prices, all the rest of it. And it's not Putin. It was from before. And it was really, Biden shoved the whole Build Back Better thing. And that just, threw gasoline on the fucking fire, right? But it was baked in from before. It was baked in from COVID. The COVID, stimulus package and all this bullshit, all the stimmy checks, all that shit. Okay. So, I mean, when you run the credit card, eventually you're going to have to pay the credit card. And well, yeah, here we are. We got to pay the credit card. And when you don't have the credit card, you don't have the money to pay the credit card. What would be wonderful? Oh, wouldn't it be wonderful if we just had this magic machine that invented money out of nothing and used it to pay off our debts? Wouldn't that be great? Oh, yeah, sure, it would be great. And for a person, for an individual, no big deal. But when it's for a whole fucking country, supposedly the biggest economy in the world, the Chinese economy is actually the biggest, but okay, we'll let it slide for now. We'll continue with this fiction that the American economy is the biggest. Well, this huge economy is broke. It's broke. It's over. Okay? And, well, and it really, really started to fall apart with the sanctions. Okay? That just sort of like tipped it over. They really do. It's a remarkable achievement. And you have to step back and say to yourself, did these fuckers do it on purpose? Well, because I wouldn't put it past them. I mean, is somebody that fucking lucky? You got to ask yourself, are they that fucking lucky, or are they really fucking clever? And when you're playing for these kinds of stakes, you got to say to yourself, maybe they're that fucking clever. I wouldn't put it past them, because they are. They are that fucking clever. Anyway, the point. The Americans have put all these sanctions that is just hurting them at a moment when the American economy is incredibly fragile and the dollar is incredibly fragile. The petrodollar, the whole architecture that's holding up the American economy, is so fucking fragile. And they went and did the sanctions packages on the Russians, which is hurting the European economy, certainly, and it's hurting the American economy. But then the Americans have gone and done something even fucking worse, that I cannot believe they fucking did this. And what they did was that they started to impose sanctions on China. Okay. Now, why is this a big deal? See, okay, what happened? Biden had a virtual call with Xi Jinping, the premier of China, and Xi Jinping said basically, we're going to support Russia, and we're sick and tired of you fucking with us. And Joe Biden said, we're not going to fuck with you no more. We're going to be, try to be allies and try to solve everything and blah, blah, blah. And then 2 days later, the Americans issued sanctions against random figures in China, basically trying to arm twist the Chinese into sanctioning Russia along with Europe and America. Now, the thing is, see, as many people have explained, and the best of them all is, of course, the boys from the Duran, Alex Christoforou and Alexander Mercouris. The Chinese, and bottom line, there's no daylight between the Russians and the Chinese, okay? Because over the last 20 years, 25 years, the Chinese have gone out of their way to build a really, really strong relationship with the Russians, because they recognize that what the Russians have, insofar as commodities, insofar as high-tech military technology and military ability and all kinds of other doodads and shit, the Chinese need that shit. And they need to have a friendly relationship with Russia. They see Russia as the future. And the Russians have tried to make friends for years with the fucking Europeans and the Americans and Europeans treated the Russians like shit. And so finally they're like, fuck it. Especially after 2014, they turned their attention to China, found a very receptive audience. All of a sudden, they're building all kinds of bridges between the Chinese and the Russians. And it's not just at the top. People only see those meetings between Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin, but it's at every level, okay? It's like at the top, but also ministerial level. Then undersecretary or second ministers, vice ministers, and the lower echelons. They are conducting joint patrols in fucking East Asia, joint air patrols. Do you have any idea how much trust you have to have in your counterpart to decide to have a joint military patrol with them? I mean, like the Americans and the Canadians do it in certain circumstances. The Americans and the Brits do it, but that's pretty much it. You have to have enormous trust with your counterpart to do such a thing. And the Russians and the Chinese do this regularly. And the Americans stupidly think that they can force the Chinese into breaking this relationship that the Chinese have spent a quarter century developing. You got to keep in mind that the Chinese and the Russians almost went to nuclear war in the 1960s. And so when Russia collapsed, when the Soviet Union rather collapsed in 91, when basically the Western vultures, capitalist vultures, were there just feeding off the still beating heart of Russia, right, which is what they were doing, the Chinese offered a helping hand. The Chinese negotiated the border disputes that they'd had. And what's interesting is that the Chinese ceded a lot of ground when they didn't have to, when they were in the driver's seat. And they could have just pushed the Russians to get their way, but the Chinese were smart. The Chinese were thinking long term. The Chinese cut all these deals, territorial dispute deals, with the Russians to end that problem, which had almost caused a nuclear war in the 60s. They ended that problem. And they built a base of trust where they could work together. And the Chinese, over the last 25 fucking years, have been working this relationship. You think that they're going to just throw that away because the Americans are just throwing a pissy fit? Fuck you, man. I mean, come on, wake up, right? So, the Biden talks to Xi Jinping. And then 2 days later, literally 2 days later, after the Chinese complained that the Americans, they never live up to their word. They always give them pretty words at the meetings and then later fuck them over. Well, Biden gave them pretty words, and then 2 days later, the American administration fucked them over with these stupid ass sanctions that targeted certain people in the Chinese Communist Party, right? And it's just the beginning of the sanctions escalation. And the whole point is to force China to sanction Russia. And see, if you want to make sure that China never does something, threaten them. Okay? If you want to make sure that a Chinese person does not do something, threaten them. Say, do this or I'm going to do something to you. And I assure you they'll never do it. They will, walk across glass, drag themselves across glass before they do it. Threats don't work with the Chinese for cultural reasons and historical reasons that are way long. And so just take my word for it. But anybody who knows anything about China can tell you the exact same thing. Okay? Threats don't work with them. Okay? You have to placate them. You have to, give them face. You have to do all kinds of other shit. But threats don't work. Punitive measures? Forget it, man. But the Americans went and did that 2 days after swearing that they wouldn't. Okay? Chinese are super fucking pissed, right? And the Chinese, they're no fools either. They're realizing this is just the beginning of the sanctions. The Americans are going to throw more sanctions our way. And the Chinese are thinking. And you, who are America, you should be thinking too. What's the position of the American economy? Does the American economy have a manufacturing base? No, it does not. Does the American economy produce and sell more than it consumes? No, it has a huge trade deficit. Does the American economy need foreigners to buy its debt to finance itself? Oh, yeah. Oh, fucking yeah. Yeah. Yeah, they do. The Chinese realize how weak the Americans are. The Chinese realize that America is not only broke, but it's also completely hollowed out. See, the Americans for the last 30 years, 40, well, you could say 35 years roughly, they started outsourcing all of their industries. And Ross Perot, he said that this day would come. Ross Perot in 92, he ran on a platform saying, no more NAFTA, no more globalization, no more outsourcing industries to Vietnam and China and Costa Rica and Peru and shit like that. No. We got to protect American industry. And the globalists, the globalists, the economists who thought they knew better, people like Paul Krugman, that whole fucking crowd, right? They insisted, no, globalization, no neoliberal economic policy, let the, no capital controls, all this good shit, right? That made people shit tons of money, but hollowed out American industrial base and turned the American economy into a service-oriented economy. It's hollow. And the Chinese know it. Because the Chinese, their economy, it's not fucking hollow. It's manufacturing. And they manufacture fucking everything. Everything from pig iron all the way to the fanciest fucking computer chips and shit. And don't give me this shit that all their goods are like cheap plastic China crap. That's not true. I mean, a lot of it is, sure, but not all of it. Okay, not even a substantial fraction of it. Okay, come on. Let's be realistic here. If only between you and me, the Chinese are winning. And the Chinese, they know it, they feel it. Because, you always know when you're winning. When you got the wind at your back and you're carrying the ball and there's no defenders and you're going to get to that fucking goal. Yeah, you know when you're fucking winning. The Chinese know it. And they know that the Americans are fucking hollow. There's nothing there. And so the Americans have just started this sanctions escalator. They started yesterday. And the Russians did this move. Putin did this move. I find it hard to believe that this move that happened today was not coordinated somehow with the Chinese, but let's not speculate. Let's talk about the facts. The facts. See, if the Americans continue with the sanctions regime, the sanctions escalator, as Alexander Mercouris is calling it, what's going to happen is that, see, at the end of the day, the Americans are going to wind up in the exact same position that they found themselves in today with Russia, that they've cut off all trade with China. Because that's what they've done. The Americans have cut off all trade, essentially, all trade with Russia. And they've demonized Russians and all this shit, right? They're going to wind up doing the exact same thing with the Chinese. But they need the Chinese because the United States doesn't manufacture any of the shit that the Chinese have. See, because insofar as commodities are concerned, like food and oil and natural gas and all that other good shit, the Americans produce it. Okay, the Americans are a net food exporter, and so they can produce the food, not all the food. A lot of it is like corn and shit that yeah, it's great for trade, but if you just have to do with what you got, it's actually a fucking disaster. And there are going to be food shortages in the United States because there are lots of foods that the United States has outsourced to other countries, and Russia is part of that whole gameplay. And so you're going to see a lack of certain foods in the United States pretty soon, and you're going to see a generalized price increase of foods. Because even though the United States is a net exporter, some of the essential foods are no longer going to be available to the United States because of these sanctions packages, you see? And so even though the United States can feed itself, the sanctions and fuel itself with OPEC oil, the sanctions package against the Russians still hurts the United States and certainly hurts the Europeans. Now, imagine what would happen if the same sanctions package is applied to the Chinese. See, the Russians have been incredibly patient, but the Chinese aren't patient. They're quite the opposite. They react quickly, swiftly, and really harshly. The Russians take their time and they're like, come on, come on, come on. They really are like a bear, You can poke a bear for quite a while before it actually just decides, fuck this shit, and roars at you and tries to kill you, okay? I mean, it takes a lot to rile up the Russians, But the Chinese aren't like that, Like they're the dragon, yeah, they like, woo, 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 yeah. And so what's going to happen with the Chinese? The Americans pulled the sanctions package bullshit. First of all, the Chinese have been studying what's been going on with the Russians, I mean, very, very closely. And because of all those multi-level contacts, they know exactly what effects the various sanctions have had on the Russian economy. So the Chinese, number one, are preparing for that eventuality that'll happen to them, number one. And number two, they're looking at how they're going to hit back at the Americans. And since the US economy is hollow and the Chinese economy is not, the Americans are going to suffer like nobody's business. And you see, you have to understand something, the catastrophe of globalization for the United States. See, because these economies that have been hollowed out with no manufacturing base, that manufacturing base is all gone. It's not that the factories went away and that you can bring them back. No, no, no. Once they go, they're gone forever. Bringing them back means that you have to build something homegrown. And here's the terrible reality. The knowledge for a lot of these factories is gone. It's just gone. And let me tell you a story. This was on one of the Chans, on 4chan, but I forget if it was on Poll or some other place. But this is a story, and I wish I actually have a screenshot of it somewhere in my fucking computers, but I'm not very good at filing shit, and so it's God knows where it is. But it was a great story, and I'm paraphrasing here, and I'm not going to tell it very well, but I'll tell it to you. Basically, there was this company like out in Boston or some shit like that that manufactured these heart-shaped boxes, okay, for chocolates. And so what happened was that they sold for Valentine's Day. The Valentine's Day was their big yearly day, right? And they worked like a charm. During the year they would sell some of these boxes, but Valentine's Day, that was. So what happened was that they sold these boxes, these heart-shaped boxes, to some chocolate company. Okay, and this company in Boston manufactured the boxes, and they had a special machine for it, and special people who ran the machine and shit. Okay, so what happened was that the chocolate company decided, we're not going to buy the fucking cardboard boxes anymore from the guy in Boston. We're going to buy it from the Chinese. Globalization and all that shit, right? And so the chocolate company stopped buying the boxes from the Boston company that manufactured them. Boston company. Well, the guy there, the owner said, well, we're going to go bankrupt if we continue operating because we don't have enough demand. So he just told all of his employees, that's it. We're going to close shop. I'm sorry, but that's that. And so he let everybody go, and he literally closed up the whole fucking business, right? And the machine that manufactured the boxes, well, it's useless now. What's the point of the fucking machine? So they took it apart and scrapped it and, salvaged what they could, got some money as best they could. And that was that, done. Well, 2 months later, right, the chocolate company comes back to the guy in Boston and says, holy shit, these fucking Chinese, man, they made these boxes with this fucking glue that smells, man. And lo and behold, it was true. They'd used this cheap glue, and so the boxes smelled something fucking awful. And of course, the chocolate company didn't want to use these fucking Chinese boxes for the chocolates. And so they tried to get the guy to make boxes again. And he's like, I can't do it. Uh, you know, the people who worked here, they're all gone. They went elsewhere. They're doing other things. And on top of that, the machine that I used, well, it's gone. It's scrapped. That's it. You know? And the chocolate company was like, come on, come on, come on, make it, make it. He said, no, it's going to take me 3, 4, 5 years to make that fucking machine again and, ramp up again. Tough titty, said the kitty. It's over. That's the American economy. See? If the United States goes ahead with this sanctions war, that it started yesterday and it's not going to stop. They're going to keep on escalating. The United States will all of a sudden find itself without any Chinese good. And in America, they don't produce shit. They don't. Oh, they'll produce some cars and some fucking fighter jets maybe. But they don't produce fucking iPhones. And look at all the goods that you have in your home. Look on the back in the small letter. What does it say? It says made in China. Start looking up all the stuff that you got, your TV, your phone, your whatever the fuck. Yeah, the F-22 Raptor or whatever the fuck plane is made by Lockheed Martin in I don't know where the fuck, right? But that's fucking it. All the shit that you need on a daily basis is made in fucking China. And the American regime, the Biden regime, just declared war, economic war, on China. And the Chinese are perfectly aware of this shit. And they're not going to take it too kindly. And they know exactly what the fucking Americans are doing. They're going to start escalating the fucking sanctions. Just like they did with the Russians, just like they did with Iran. And the crazy thing is that the Americans keep doing this shit. And they actually think that the sanctions are going to do fucking shit to change the behavior of these countries, to make them act in a way that the Americans are happier with. And it doesn't. It does the exact opposite. The funniest thing about these fucking sanctions that they hit with the Russians, I'm going to do actually a short video about this. You see, who gets affected by all these sanctions? Like, for instance, they cut off Facebook and Instagram and all this shit. Who gets affected by that shit in Russia? The people who are most pro-Western. They're the ones who use all that shit. And now that they can't use it, that they've been punished because they're Russian, what do you think all those Russians are thinking? They're thinking, fuck the West. The Americans, the West, are antagonizing precisely the group of people who would be opposed to Vladimir Putin's war. Antagonize those people so much that right now, polls in Russia put popular support for Vladimir Putin at fucking 75% and higher. That's the truth. Even the people who are against Vladimir Putin are saying these fucking Americans, these fucking Europeans who are fucking us over and not letting us use our fucking Instagram and Facebook and iPhones and shit like that, these cocksuckers, fuck them, I'm with Putin. That's what they're saying. And what the fuck you think is going to happen when the Americans do these sanctions to the fucking Chinese? Huh? You think they're going to like it or not? No, they're going to not like it. And they're going to cut off trade. And they're going to stop buying treasury bonds. So in the United States, if this sanctions escalator continues, which it will, because these stupid motherfuckers don't have a reverse gear. They're so arrogant and conceited, they can't admit to the fact that they've made a mistake. And so since they can't admit to the fact that they've made a mistake, they can't go back on their stupid decisions. They keep on doubling down. And so they just imposed sanctions on the Chinese. They're going to impose more sanctions and more sanctions and more and more and more. And finally, the Chinese are going to say, fuck you, cocksuckers. We are not going to sell you shit. We're not going to take dollars, only yuan. Fuck you. That's what the Chinese are going to say. Just like the Russians just said it to the Europeans. The Russians said to the Europeans, fuck your euros, give me rubles. When this happens with the Chinese, not if, when, which I think is going to be before the end of the year, the American economy is going to suffer. I mean, if you thought that the Great Depression was bad, you ain't seen nothing. Hold my beer, buddy, like that. This is a catastrophe. And the United States is committing suicide. The United States is committing financial suicide. I mean, look, everything that I've talked to you about here, it doesn't involve any nuclear weapons or any war or nothing. It's just economics. Just by way of economy and the stupid sanctions, this addiction to sanctions, because it makes the stupid American politicians and the people in the Biden administration feel virtuous, like they're doing something. And they're only hurting themselves. It's like I said in the thumbnail, do what I want or I'll shoot. What the fuck, man? This is what America is doing. And it's the stupid, incompetent leadership the United States has that's so arrogant. It doesn't look at the world the way the world sees itself. It doesn't put themselves in the shoes of the other guy. The ruble is going to become the world's global reserve currency because it is backed by commodities. And the Chinese are going to fuck over the American economy, and it's just going to completely collapse. And when I say it's going to completely collapse, it's not that you're not going to be able to buy iPhones, okay? It's going to be like 50% unemployment. It's going to be, I'm telling you, and it's going to happen, okay? And you have to, the thing you have to pay attention to, and I mean, so that you see that it's coming, is watch the Biden administration or whoever replaces Biden, because it looks like Biden is going to be shoved aside pretty soon. The fact that the Hunter Biden thing was confirmed by the New York Times leads me to conclude that the establishment have realized that they have to get rid of Biden and put somebody new. But the problem is that who are they going to put? Kamala Harris is a fucking moron. They're going to have to replace her too, or really puppeteer her so that, she does what they want her to do. I don't know about that. But anyway, the point is they're getting rid of Joe Biden. And so whoever is there, well, you got to see what sanctions they continue to impose on China. See, you got to focus on that. Pay attention to the sanctions that they put on China and pay attention to the response of China to these sanctions. Because they're not going to be fucking happy. They're not, and they're going to lash out, and they're going to put sanctions of their own. How many people are? 6,500. Way to go. Yeah, very happy. I hope you're enjoying it. Let's see if you guys are enjoying this. Hit me with a okay if you're enjoying it. Hit me with a -1 if you're not. And if you're really enjoying it, just put a row of 9s. Yeah, 3 arbitrary things that will, if you're really enjoying it, a row of 9s. If you're just enjoying it, put okay. And if you think it sucks, just put -1. I'll wait for you guys to catch up. People say that it's the Khazarians. Do you hear me disagreeing? Wait, this is taking a long time. Nobody's saying anything. Yeah, bye, Brandon. Yeah. Anyway, so how long have I been going? Well, on the other one, I was going for like at least half an hour. I think it was like 45 minutes. And here I've gone 65 minutes. So I'm going to end it here. But I want you to understand what's going on. The the United States is committing suicide. See, it's not military. It's abusing a structure that took many decades to build, and the people in positions of leadership are abusing the superstructure, and they think that even if they abuse it, it'll still stand. And they don't realize how fragile it actually is. It's fragile because they've allowed it to be so weakened over the decades. And there's no way to, in a practical sense, there's no way to fix this. It's over, okay? And it's only going to accelerate. And it's going to make a lot of people in the United States panic. It's over for the United States. I mean, I'm not saying it's over for the dollar. No, I'm saying it's over for America. It's over, okay? And we're seeing the outlines of how that's happening. When I did that video back in October, leave the West while you still can, basically I had a sense that this was coming, okay? I couldn't quite believe it was happening this fast, but it is happening this fast. And it's collapsing, and there's no way to stop it. There's nothing that the United States could do right now. If there was like some brilliant dictator who took over the whole fucking thing in the United States and started trying to impose a new system or fix the system, keep it up, right? It's too late. And you know what the biggest problem is? And I hate to say it because it's taken me I haven't wanted to face this reality, but when I was growing up in the 70s, um, I grew up in a little house on Delco Avenue in the San Fernando Valley. And around us, there were like really decent people, Americans. And we were, a little Latino family, right? But both of my parents spoke perfect English because they'd grown up, they spent a long time in England and learned English there. And I remember, going to weekend barbecues at the neighbors' houses and whatever. And there was this one guy who was like a policeman, LAPD, and he was the nicest guy, nicest fellow imaginable. And I used to play with his daughter, and I was, 4 years old, 5 years old, something like that. And I had a wonderful time. I had a big wheel, and go around the neighborhood with the friends. It was just fantastic. It really was the Golden State. And like I said, there was this neighbor who was a policeman. There was this retired neighbor. I remember he was like a tall fellow. And all the people there. I don't remember like that specific, but I remember they were all like salt of the earth people, hardworking people, decent people, middle class people. You know, and they never harmed anybody. They'd always, they were very clear on their values, on what was right, what was wrong, what was acceptable, and what was not acceptable. And growing up, I always had that sense that that's America. That's America. Just decent, hardworking people. And now I look at America and they're decadent and degenerate, or else they're whiny little bitches, quite frankly. I look at the soldiers who came here, right? Who came to Ukraine, right? And they're all just Reddit warriors and pathetic little bitches. Real pussies. They came here, they didn't even get a little kick in the pants, man. And they're like freaking out and like all scared. I have to admit, I was like, is this the youth today of America? They seem like whiny little bitches, man. Because they are. Where's the air cover? There was one guy who was like bitching about that. They didn't even sound the alarms when the missiles came. It's a fucking war, motherfucker. Come on. And I just look at the youth today in America. I think to myself, would I want to raise a child in America today? With crazy teachers, purple-haired teachers with tattoos and face rings and shit like that, teaching them that, There are infinite number of genders to little 3-year-olds or little, third graders or whatever the fuck. No, 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 nothing to do with that. And I realized that the United States is just decayed. And it's not just the system, it's the people. It's the people. They're decadent and degenerate. They're hedonistic and they're afraid of everything. I mean, they're pathetic. They are. Even the soldiers are pathetic. And I have to admit, I've said this in other opportunities, that, seeing this war and how the Russians are fighting it and how the Americans would have fought it, the Americans would have just fucking destroyed everything, right? And I realized that the Americans' way of war is just immoral. But okay, that's another conversation. Looking at the American people today, they're just like whiny bitches, over entitled, thinking that the rest of the world has to conform to their notions of what's right and wrong. And they get hysterical over every little fucking thing. And you can blame it on social media, you can blame it on this, that, the other, but bottom line, this happens to every great empire. It peaks out, and I realize now that when I was growing up, that was pretty much the peak in the early 70s, late 60s. I actually tend to think that the peak of America was probably around the early 60s. And 64 might have been the peak. And since then, if I had to peg it, I'd say the demolition of Penn Station. That was the peak. The day before they started demolishing that station, which is so beautiful, that was the peak. And then it's just been, and it's accelerating. See, that's the thing. That's the tragedy. It's accelerating. And when you see the people who are running things now, and, look at Jen Psaki. Can she compare to Teddy Sorensen, for instance? Oh, you don't know who Teddy Sorensen is. He was the press secretary for John Kennedy. Can Jake Sullivan compare to George McBundy? Again, George McBundy was the national security advisor back in the 60s. Or George Kennan, the architect of the whole Cold War, who basically created a geopolitical architecture that ensured that there would not be a nuclear war and that would ultimately end in the collapse of the Soviet Union, painlessly, without a shot being fired. That kind of statesman doesn't exist today. And the only guy who seems to know what the fuck he's doing right now is Vladimir Putin, number one, top. He clearly knows what the fuck he's doing. And Xi Jinping is not really a close second, but he's a second. Respectable second, right? But after that, there's nobody. Nobody knows what the fuck they're doing. Macron had his moment that he could have stepped up, but no. But, it's just so pathetic. And the Americans, the more they realize that they're slipping, the more desperate they become, the more they panic, the more they lash out. And that's the great fear that I have. Because America is collapsing because the American people are degenerate, decadent, weak, disgusting. Look at the women with all their fucking tattoos and that horrible shit. All that tattoos all over the place. They look like, I don't know, they look degenerate. Just looking at them, they look degenerate. And God alone knows how many sexual partners that they have had. And look at the men staring at video games all day, just gelded by video screens. Where are those men going to defend anything at all? Nothing. And the thing is, it's understandable because they have nothing to defend. Because there's nothing worth defending in the United States anymore. It's a broken empire. It's over. Okay? And as it collapses, we are seeing the collapse. And you look at the people, and that tells you all you need to know. The people, they're all fat and slovenly. They don't take care of their appearances because they don't have anything to look forward to. They don't have anything that they aspire to. Just eating fucking junk food, like machines, and getting fat and pathetic, slathered in grease. Nikocado avocado, that fat guy who does shows about eating food. That's popular, man. What the fuck you think that is? That's a sign of decadence. Okay? Decadence in the literal sense of just decadence of decay. And so the great fear for the rest of the world, certainly for me, is that the people running America will, in desperation and panic, if they lose some battle in some pointless war that they start, which I think is going to be with the Chinese, if they lose out, that they'll decide to use nuclear weapons. That's my great fear. Oh, you sunk one of our carriers. Well, we're gonna stick you with a nuclear weapon. Well, just the one. Just to show you that we're tough. And it's going to be sort of like, we're just going to slip it in, slide it in, just the tip, just to see how it feels, kind of thing. And the Chinese aren't going to take too kindly to that. And they're going to go whole hog. They're going to go ape shit. Of course they are. I mean, come on. If somebody nukes any fucking thing, what the fuck do you think the Chinese are going to do? Huh? I mean, I think that the Russians are clever enough to escape that trap. And they're doing moves that's just scaring off the American military, that the American military doesn't want to engage because they realize they get their asses handed to them. And so they realize we can't fuck with the Russians. But they're going to think, oh, but we can fuck with the Chinese because the Chinese, they're weak and we've got our aircraft carriers and shit. They don't seem to realize or want to realize that the Chinese are dreaming of the day when they can get to sink an aircraft carrier, an American aircraft carrier, because they will never forget the humiliation in the late 90s when Bill Clinton had one of the aircraft carrier groups go up and down the Taiwan Strait. The Chinese viewed it as a fuck you to their face. They'll never forgive the United States for that. If they're still bitching and moaning about NATO accidentally dropping a bomb on their embassy in Belgrade, when that happened 25 fucking years ago, or 23 years ago, and it's just a fucking embassy, right? And it was an accident, a clear accident. Do you think that they're going to forget about the humiliation of the Americans parading their aircraft carrier in front of their own fucking coast at 40 miles away, or whatever the fuck it was? That is something the Chinese, they have their fucking dignity, man. They're never going to forgive that shit. They're going to sink a carrier when the war with China comes. And if they sink a carrier or two or three, what do you think the Americans are going to do? Do you think the Americans are going to take kindly to that shit? Do you think that the Americans, in fear and panic and desperation, might not drop a nuke on the Chinese? And when that happens, all bets are off. All bets are off, man. You have no idea how that shit's going to end, It's just so heartbreaking, Because like I said, I grew up in this golden era in California. California was the golden state. It really was. I remember driving down these wide open freeways, and they were brand new, like the 405. And I remember going up north to San Francisco on this endless fucking drive. When you're 5 years old, a 5-hour drive is an eternity, right? And I remember going up, on this endless drive, and just like, we got to San Francisco, and it was so beautiful and just lovely. And it just felt vibrant and alive. And now it's just decadent, degenerate. I always think of that trans woman who looked like a demon reading children's books to a classroom full of kids, and the kids staring up at this demon-looking thing, horrified, innately horrified. And we're supposed to think that that's great, that that's inclusive, that that's just fucking peachy keen? What the fuck, man? So anyway, the tragedy for me, I suppose, is that I'm watching, as the empire collapses. This is going to be the year. This is it. And it's happening. And I hope I've given you an explanation as to how it's happening and what you should pay attention to. Pay attention to the sanctions. That's what you have to pay attention to. The more sanctions, the closer the United States is to the abyss. And then there's going to be a war breaking out with China. over Taiwan, because the Americans are going to double down and double down and double down. And finally, they're going to recognize Taiwan as an independent country, which is the Chinese red line. Chinese are going to go ape shit, and that's when the war starts. And I'm betting right now, and this is just idle speculation, but when the Americans say that they are going to recognize Taiwan as an independent country, I suspect that the Chinese are going to launch a preemptive surprise attack on whichever aircraft carrier is closest and sink it or them. Yeah, that's my suspicion. It's what I'd do if I were them. Okay, and yeah, but you watch. The trigger is going to be that the Americans recognize Taiwan as an independent country, the only democracy in the East, or whatever the fuck whatever stupid ass excuse they're going to come up with, and that's going to trigger the war, and the Americans will lose. And it's not that they're going to just lose the war; it's going to be the collapse of the whole fucking thing. Yeah, and it's going to be dark ages for America, assuming, of course, there's no nuclear war. Because if there's a nuclear war, man, America's going to go like Mad Max, man. It's going to be fucking nothing, right? But assuming there's no nuclear war, the United States is going to go through a dark ages that's going to last a century. It's over in America. You got to understand that. It's over. And this thing with Putin, trivial though it seems, it's the nail in the coffin. It's it. This is it. I mean, you can feel it. Yeah. So anyway, there's nothing more for me to tell you. I hope you enjoyed the show.